Awesome. I think I'm getting this squared away. Let's see. Hello, hello. Hi, Julie. Thanks for tuning in. And I'm like right on time. That's very much me. So take a few minutes, let people roll in. Hello, Alicia. Ooh, very pretty name. Awesome. Looks like everything is live and going well. This is my first time on Facebook Live. I feel like it's a millennial rite of passage to do something live like this. So I'm very excited. Hi, Wendy. Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, my pleasure. Just take a minute or two and let people kind of trickle in. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming. Well, virtually watching. Maybe you're eating dinner. Maybe you're hanging out. Maybe you're helping kids with homework on the other side. I don't blame you. Awesome. Just wait another minute or two. Let people get situated. Hi, church fam. Hi, CPCC. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in with me. I'm really excited to have had this opportunity to work with Teen Esteem and just kind of talk to parents and loved ones about eating disorders. So we'll just give it another minute or so and see if a few more names want to trickle in. I don't want to wait too long, just because I have a lot to say and not a ton of time to say it. So I want to make sure that you guys leave here with the knowledge that you need, or at least some solid foundation. So while we're waiting for people to tune in, I just want to introduce myself. Hi, my name is McKenna. I am a therapist at Community Presbyterian Counseling Center out in San Ramon. Born and raised in the Bay Area. I went to school down in Southern California. I attended Fuller Seminary for my master's in marital and family therapy. And Teen Esteem and I have been having conversations about, having a talk or just sharing a little bit of information, especially with parents, about the topic of eating disorders. And this is my specialty as a therapist. I am an anorexia survivor myself. And I also, part of my training experience as a therapist has been at an organization, or a part of an organization called Cielo House. And Cielo House is a program for adolescents and adults who are in recovery from feeding and eating disorders. It's what we would call a higher level of care, so to speak. There's a whole lot of acronyms, intensive outpatient, they call IOP, PHP, which is partial hospitalization. So it's more intensive treatment programs for eating disorders. So I did do some time there. I'm no longer there, but I cherish my time there. And then what else do I want to mention? So I think something that I do want to throw out there is why now? Why did Teen Esteem reach out to me regarding eating disorders and having this talk for parents at this time? And we just agreed that now more than ever, of course, eating disorders are always a very serious thing, but with this pandemic, with the shelter in place, with teenagers and kids being at home and doing learning and academic stuff from home, these behaviors and the eating disorder behaviors are becoming more and more noticed. They are, parents are starting to pick up on things that they might not have seen had their children been in school or out with friends. And also the heightened tension and anxiety that's been occurring has also exacerbated for some people the symptoms of their eating disorders. So we just figured this, why not now? Now more than ever, it's very important. And so at the very end, again, I don't have a ton of time. I'm condensing like 2 hours worth into 15, 20 minutes. I will probably err on 20, but we'll do a Q&A at the end, and I'm going to leave you guys with a handful of resources for further information. So if there are questions, or again, this isn't meant to be comprehensive, but I have some resources for you to follow up that are very, very helpful. So it's about 5 after, so I'm just going to jump in. We're going to cover in the next 15 minutes or so what are eating disorders, just a general overview, some facts and figures, what aren't eating disorders, so naming a few of the myths or misnomers about eating disorders, some of the basic and generic signs and symptoms that you might observe that might be cues or warning flags that your teenager, your child is struggling with these behaviors, and what you can do about that. Prevention, treatment, that kind of thing. And I do want to throw out a trigger warning. I might go into some more specific behaviors vaguely, but for those of you who maybe have a history of this yourself, I want to honor and acknowledge that. And so I just encourage you to care for yourselves around that as we go through this, and just wanted you to have that heads up. So again, Q&A at the end. Let me know if you have any questions. So to start, a basic overview, eating disorders, we'll go straight to the Mayo Clinic definition. So eating disorders are serious conditions related to persistent eating behaviors that negatively impact your health, your emotions, your ability to function, your ability to think clearly, and just in general, impair your overall functioning in your day-to-day life. The most common eating disorders that we know of are bulimia nervosa, anorexia nervosa, binge eating disorder are the top 3. And then there's also this category of other specified feeding and eating disorders, because a lot of people don't fit nice and neat into one box in terms of an eating disorder. And there are a few others that I didn't mention as well that are equally as severe. But just because you don't fit into a box doesn't mean you don't have an eating disorder, doesn't mean you are, not sick enough to get treatment. So I like to throw that out there. And why this is so important. Eating disorders have, other than they were recently surpassed by opioid addiction, but eating disorders have the highest or second highest mortality rate of any mental health condition. So they are deadly. They're very serious. And even if they don't lead to fatalities, they can bring about issues with bone density, GI issues. I was about to say gastrointestinal, that's a tongue twister. Issues. They bring about other just significant health risks. So they go beyond the mental health realm and impact the physical. So it's something that we really want to be mindful of. Some of the challenges when it comes to disordered eating or eating disorders is that disordered eating is very, very, very normalized in our culture. Unfortunately, it's actually in lesser terms praised. Often people that I work with, started on a diet. They started on keto. They started fill in the blank diet that encouraged them to restrict an entire food group. And then it just kind of became a slippery slope. So our culture normalizes disordered eating, and then often too, unfortunately, praises it. So things like, oh my gosh, you're looking so good. You're losing weight. That starts to encourage the person to continue down that path, and then to a point that it's not healthy anymore, but they have this pervasive fear of, well, I'm going to stop getting that validation. I'm going to stop getting these compliments. I'm going to stop getting this affirmation if I allow myself to gain weight. And that's where they start to place that identity and worth in what they're looking like. So those are just some of the kind of general challenges that we know of when it comes to working with eating disorders. So what aren't eating disorders? Eating disorders are not about vanity. They are not a choice. They are not an illness that is purely reserved for adolescent white females. You do not need to be emaciated or very thin to be diagnosable in terms of an eating disorder. In fact, some of my most severe clients are some of the most normal looking. So that can be, again, something to just be aware of, that they don't have one look, and oftentimes people don't receive the treatment they need by doctors, etc., because they look normal. So that's something to be aware of. And then also, I'm aware I'm speaking a lot to parents, and I want you guys to hear eating disorders are not your fault. I know a lot of the parents I work with kind of go into the, oh my gosh, what did I do? What could I have done differently? How did I fail as a parent? They're not your fault. They're actually a result of a combination of a bunch of different factors, which I'm going to go into in a second. So just like to throw that out there. And then, another misnomer too is just that they're only risky if you are really, really thin. You can have a plethora of different health conditions or consequences, even if you're not super, super thin. So just like to name that. They are not caused by one single thing. They don't fit into a pretty box. They're caused by a combination of biological factors. So things like genetics can play a role. I know I have a family history of anorexia. There's also, I won't get super into the science, but they are doing some research now into what there might be some hormonal and other chemical imbalances that can play a role in development of an eating disorder. So there's biological factors, there's the psychological factors. So they might, an individual with an eating disorder might have a history with depression, anxiety, low self-esteem. They might have experienced some kind of a trauma, and the trauma might not be, something massive or explosive, but it was significant to that individual. So history of trauma is a definite big one. And then of course too, there's the desire for control, the desire for safety, that perfectionism tendency is a big one. And then other factors like environmental or social factors. So internalized fat phobia. So again, going back to culture, this idea that your weight directly correlates with health and your worth. Other things like, history of being bullied, history of teasing around weight, being put on diets at a super, super young age. And then even too, being really young and having certain allergies, for example, that necessitate certain restrictive patterns, as in I can't eat certain foods, and then it can cultivate a sense of hyper pickiness and can lead to a whole lot of things happen in combination, which can lead to ultimately linking to an eating disorder. And then also too, again, that not wanting to lose sight of the fact that sometimes there are disordered eating patterns in a family system or amongst friends that become normalized and internalized. So again, questions will be reserved at the end. So feel free to let me know in the comments if you have any questions. So the things that you as parents or peers, loved ones, might want to look for in terms of signs, warning signs, symptoms that an individual might be engaging disordered patterns. Things like a significant preoccupation with weight, with exercise, with calories, calorie counting, preoccupation with dieting, things like that. They might have super rigid food rules or food patterns, like they only eat foods in a certain order, a certain time of day. Get really upset if their routines around food change. You might start noticing your son or daughter starting to trying to find ways to fill up on as few calories as possible. So they might be eating foods that are filling but are low in calories, have few to no calories. Things like withdrawing. They might start to disengage from friends, from social activities, especially social activities that are revolving around food. You might notice them engaging with, or you might notice significant changes in mood. So they might be displaying just kind of a general flatness, or maybe they're oscillating between intense anger sometimes. They might lash out and then come back around with immense feelings of regret. You're also going to notice things like, for example, there's like the compulsive exercisers. So they will go way out of their way to make sure that they're exercising, even if it means exercising while they're sick, while they're injured. I recently just posted an Instagram post just encouraging the compulsive exercisers out there, hey, beware, don't go out in the smoke, right? That's not good for your lungs. But someone with an unhealthy relationship with exercise might have gone for a 10-mile run despite the smoke, right? You might notice things like wearing baggy clothes, feeling cold often. You might start to notice that they are reporting to you or mentioning to you lightheadedness. They seem kind of detached. That can be a sign of malnourishment. You might notice dramatic shifts in weight, so going up and then down. Evidence of purging behaviors, so that one of the misnomers is that purging is solely vomiting. But purging can also be things like laxative abuse, compulsive exercising, diuretics, things like that. And then, so yeah, let's see what else. You might notice with certain disordered eating patterns, like significant amounts of food just disappearing, or evidence that food has been eaten in secret. You might notice wrappers left behind. You might notice food that you'd had in the pantry, significant amounts are gone all of a sudden. They are sometimes associated with feelings of guilt and depression. And then mind you too, I'm not going into all of the eating disorders and all of the signs and symptoms. At the very end, I'm going to mention, I'll plug it here, I guess, a link to the NEDA, so the National Eating Disorder Association. They have what's called a parent toolkit. It's a PDF, and it breaks down all of the warning flags, all the potential signs and symptoms, the psychological, emotional, physical. So really goes through a comprehensive list, and you don't need to hit every marker on the list, but if you notice trends, it can be just a good starting place. So those might be some of the things that you might see. And then I also want to mention too the idea of orthorexia. So sometimes eating disorders can manifest as or develop into or develop from what's called orthorexia, which is a significant preoccupation with only eating things that are healthy, right? And it's all about counting your macros, and I am willing to eat if I exercise. So punishing yourself and earning calories through exercise. And that can be true of all the eating disorders, to be honest. So also paying attention to, is this health compulsion really a mask for an eating disorder? So just being aware of that. So again, I know I'm kind of rushing through this. So again, let me know if you have any questions at the end. I'm happy to stick around for a little while. So what do you do if you are concerned or hearing this, or you read something? You might be having questions about, like, is this something that my son or daughter is experiencing? And again, throwing out that to challenge one of the common misnomers that it's only for teenage girls, it affects a variety of all genders, all ethnicities, all ages, kids, teens, adults, all sexual orientations. So just, not trying to put it into that one box. But so if you do notice that is, and that's starting to become a concern, it's time to do something, because by the time that you are seeing it, it's probably pretty serious. And I don't say that to scare you. Just the reality of eating disorders is that they are characterized by denial, minimization. There's this whole belief that I'm not sick enough to have an eating disorder, even though I'm really doing damage to my body. And it's very secretive. So if you are noticing your son or daughter's throwing things in the trash on a consistent basis, is making excuses not to eat, you're noticing anxiety around food, it's something to pay attention to because they've probably been hiding it for a while. So the first thing you're going to want to do is reach out to your doctor, is let them know specifically what it is your concerns are, what you're worried about. Unfortunately, there's not a ton of awareness in some medical arenas around what symptoms and signs to look for. So really needing to name it with your practitioner. I remember, unfortunately, when I was in, the most ill place of my eating disorder, I was significantly malnourished. My heart rate was next to nothing. My doctor goes, "Oh, you're fine. Just put on some weight, and your heart rate is this low because you are a runner. So you're fine." You have to advocate, and they don't mean anything by that. It's just the importance of, no, I need to get the support that I need. And there are doctors out there who specialize in treating eating disorders and know exactly what to look for. And then also, too, reaching out to a therapist, getting some counseling support, not just for your son or daughter, but for you as parents, that, how you can care for yourselves and for your loved one going through that. And then, 2, eating disorders are unique in that they do require often nutritional support. Nutritional rehabilitation is what they call it. So, and that the goal of that isn't necessarily weight gain. In some cases that is prescribed, but the goal of that is really to normalize eating patterns. So again, you don't need to be severely malnourished to need a dietitian when it comes to eating disorder recovery. You've likely developed patterns, behaviors, fears around food, patterns that are really challenging to break. It's almost like an addiction, an eating disorder. It actually has a lot of parallels to an addiction. But you can't quit food cold turkey, right? You have to relearn how to develop a healthy relationship to it. And then I want to make sure I get to everything with what you can do about that. Anything else I want to mention? When you do talk to your children about your concerns, just being sure to come from a place of concern and curiosity versus one of fear, stigma, shame. You might get a not so great reaction, that's expectable, but just coming to them using I statements, expressing your love and your concern can be just a good stepping stone. Practicing what you want to say before you talk to them and going back to that NEDA toolkit, it breaks down some really awesome strategies for how to interact with your kids around that. And then lastly, the last topic I'm going to go into today, or just kind of touch on, is prevention. What can you do to prevent this from becoming a thing? Maybe you have a history of it in your family. Maybe you just are on the precipice of wanting to have kids someday. Maybe your son or daughter is you just want to be alert about these things. Conversations, talking to your kids about the reality of these things and letting them know and expressing concerns. Other things that can be really important for prevention is not trying to stray away from moralizing food. And what I mean by that is sometimes we get stuck in this tendency of food is either good or bad for you. It's healthy or unhealthy. That can actually create food guilt and can lead to a bunch of different challenges around that. And then also focusing on restricting food, going into diets with young kids. It's very, that's a delicate thing. And wanting to, we know from research, for example, the more that you restrict certain food groups from your kids, the more they think it's not accessible to them. When they do access it, ultimately, they tend to overcompensate. And so coming from a place of intuitive eating, it's actually a book that if the lovely Tina Steam helper there can send out, Chris, the link to the intuitive eating website. And there's also a book that talks about principles for teaching your children and your whole family how to eat intuitively and learn to listen to your body in a way that is not into this diet culture thing. And then also too, checking in with your own beliefs and experiences that have to do with food, with body image. What were the messages sent in your family of origin? What experiences did you have when you were, growing up, developing, that you might inadvertently be carrying into your family system, which is normal to do, but just kind of being aware of that. And you guys are also doing one of the biggest things, which is just getting educated, being aware, knowing what to look for. That's the biggest thing. Helping to encourage your kids that their value and their worth have absolutely nothing to do with weight and appearance. It's about who they are as people and helping them differentiate those things as early on as possible. I mean, adolescence is a tough time. So just being sympathetic and empathetic to what they're going through. Anything else in terms of prevention? The last thing I want to say about prevention is just putting in a plug for this concept called HAZE. So HAZE is an acronym. It stands for Health at Every Size. And this is the mentality I, as a practitioner, as a clinician, subscribe to. And it's the idea that weight, we have this tendency in our culture to attribute weight to health to weight. Hate to break it to you all, BMI is a bogus standard. And so if we can come from a place of your health is so much more than about a number on a scale and not overgeneralize your health as being directly correlated to that. Can weight sometimes play a role? Sure. But just not wanting to minimize the fact that health has to do with so many factors, weight being a very small part of that. That it has to do with your mental and emotional state. It has to do with circumstances, accessibility to resources, and seeking to avoid weight loss or gain from being the primary goal can be a really helpful thing. So, and then also too, in one of the links, I believe I attached something called Poodle Science. I think I send that out. And that kind of goes into the whole HAZE mentality. So I encourage you guys to watch that. I didn't do an awesome job explaining that here. I didn't have a ton of time, but I encourage you guys to check that out. So that's everything I'm going to cover. I'm happy to just kind of feed through here and look at some questions. Thank you all for tuning in and just listening. I know I for sure went over, though I'm not sure how much. I haven't been looking at the time. Let me see here. So scroll through. So how well can people with disorders hide their preoccupation with food? Are there always visible signs? To answer the first question, very, very, very well. The lengths that I've seen some of my clients go to hide the behaviors is surprising. And I think part of that has to do with their own denial, right? Their own, oh, this is nothing. Their own fear that this coping mechanism, because again, what an eating disorder really is a coping mechanism. They're afraid it's going to be ripped away from them. And so if it's working for them, if this, I call it often with my clients, this scratchy blanket, it's keeping them warm, but it's really uncomfortable. They think it's helping them. So they are going to do whatever it takes to keep it under wraps. And then, are there always visible signs? Visible in some form or another. You're going to notice some trends, some patterns if you're paying attention and as the severity intensifies. But again, it's challenging because you have to know what you're looking for. I'll put it that way. If you know what you're looking for, more than likely, I don't want to say for sure, but more than likely you'd be able to pick up on it. I know that, for example, my family, It took them a while to pick up on it because I would minimize, because again, it was praised for a while that I was losing weight. So I found really creative ways, but if it's a pattern, if it's a trend, you'll start to notice that, or you should start to notice that. And as it's getting more and more severe, you'll start to see even more so those tendencies. Let's see. Okay. So when you express concerns of weight loss and eating habits, will a person with a disorder say, yes, I'm struggling, I think I have a problem? Or will it be more likely denial? I'm not meaning to lose weight, I'm a picky eater, etc. Because I can see a parent taking that as, nope, my kid is okay. That is a great question. It can mask and be that I'm fine, everything's good. I have this phrase that I use with my clients and with their parents. I call it the oh crap moment. Sorry if that's offensive to anybody, but it's kind of this moment where, oh crap, I have a problem, right? And until that time, like for me, it was when I discovered that there was that lanugo growing on my face, right? I had that little soft peach fuzz coming in because I was so malnourished. That was my oh crap moment. Until then, it was just, oh, I'm not hungry. Oh, I'm not feeling like it, or oh, I'm not meaning to lose weight can sometimes be like, oh, I went too far. And they actually might mean that, but there's still that part of them that is so afraid of putting weight back on that they will stay where they are. They'd rather convince themselves that they're not sick enough to need treatment or continue in the behavior because it's become so ingrained. But once you have that oh crap moment, that's when I started to come forward and be honest with, I'm struggling. And I kind of had to realize that for myself. Not saying that as a parent, if your kid's not there yet, you shouldn't express concern, because you absolutely should. And oftentimes I sit with my teen clients and go, I bet you think you're not sick enough to be here, huh? Well, I'm here to tell you that you are. For those that do fit the criteria. Understandably, not everybody is gonna for sure fit that just because a parent has a suspicion, but sometimes better be safe than sorry. Is there any age that is typical for seeing this in kids? That is a really good question. I don't know. So instead of typical, I'm going to say that they are seeing trends in actual children, so under 12. We're starting to see more prevalence of eating disorders. So it really can manifest at any age. It doesn't discriminate. Let's see what else. Does binge eating always include throwing up laxatives? No. So binge eating disorder is characterized by this, eating objectively large amount of food in a discrete period of time, and a sense of loss of control over the eating. And it actually doesn't entail the purging behaviors. Typically when we think purging behaviors, we think anorexia and we think bulimia. And another misnomer too is that anorexia doesn't have purging. It absolutely can. The distinction between anorexia and bulimia is actually the significant loss of weight. Okay. When I had my oh crap moment, I was in my early 20s. And I'd had it for, a few years by then. Some people have to have multiple oh crap moments. Some people don't have that oh crap moment until later on. Let's see, anything else? I feel like there's something else I was gonna mention, but I'm having a hard time recalling it. Okay, and then I see a couple questions about more telltale signs. That's where too I want to again plug this parent toolkit, because I do think that it really breaks down some of those behaviors. And then are you seeing? That is a really good question. So are you seeing a link to significant weight loss and vaping in teens? That is a great question. I don't know yet. I'm actually going to be curious to see what that's like. Maybe if we think about the fact that vaping sometimes is a way of coping with anxiety and vaping in general can be a coping mechanism. So sometimes our coping mechanisms like to hop from one thing to another. That's why it's important to bring in new, more adaptive coping behaviors. But yeah, I will be curious to see kind of what the research suggests on that. Had your parents and others expressed concerns prior? That's a good question. I think they didn't know what to say. I think they were at this place of, we don't know what to do. I think they started to notice things. And then I also think that there were certain not so helpful trends in my family system that encouraged healthy eating so much that I think there was some kind of not wanting to see it at the time, which was hard. And I think looking back, I realized, to be in that position would have been so hard on them. I think they just didn't quite know what to do at the time. Body type. How much does body type play into this? I'll answer that with kind of just a general response that I do feel is relevant, in that, again, our culture really, really identifies with this idea of the thin ideal, and wanting to look or be a certain weight in order to be successful, to be healthy, to be attractive. And so typically, like, a lot of people in larger bodies do experience a sense of discrimination, and oftentimes eating disorders can in some ways stem from that desire to match that thin ideal, even if it goes completely against their natural set point, their genetic predisposition. But it affects all body types, all shapes and sizes. It definitely doesn't have one look. All right, let's see, any others? Okay, let's see. Oh, I'm so glad you brought up social media. Thank you, Wendy. Any research or experience from your practice in the correlation between social media and disorders in teens? Thank you for bringing this up. So eating disorders, that social media is definitely a risk factor, I would say. So it doesn't necessarily cause the eating disorder, but if we think about social media and we think about links to heightened anxiety and depression, and then also this inundation with fitspo, so that fit inspiration culture, the thin ideal models, these floods and floods of what the teens are seeing nowadays when it comes to social media, it's definitely a challenge, and something to be aware of. Do I think that social media is a villain? No, because there's a ton of awesome social media out there that is very pro eating disorder recovery, very about body neutrality and body positivity, that really is working hard to counter diet culture and all of the challenges that come with that. So it's about being discerning. You don't necessarily need to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but social media is certainly a risk factor. Oh, thank you, Tom. All right, any final questions? I would also love you guys to check out some of the resources that I linked to Chris. Again, NITA, the toolkit, the intuitive eating book. There's also a book by Dr. Gaudiani about, it's this idea of sick enough. So again, it's very common in the eating disorder community for people not to believe they are sick enough to need treatment. I hear that all the time. There's a lot of comparison of, as long as I'm not as sick as this person, I'm okay. So this book really breaks that down and challenges that misconception. And then the Poodle Science, check that out. It's a 2-minute video, cartoon drawing, all about health at every size and why you can't just pinpoint all people into one size category. And feel free to, reach out with any other questions. Again, so I work for a Community Presbyterian Counseling Center. I'd be happy to chat with you. I primarily work with adults, so parents and then also adults recovering from eating disorders. But I'm happy to be available as a resource. And again, thank you guys for tuning in, checking this out. I really appreciate Tina's Steam for letting me have this opportunity. Thank you guys so much. I wish I could stay longer. Again, this was like, I could talk for hours about this. There's so many things that I'm sure I missed that I would have loved to have mentioned, but I appreciate you guys. So thank you and have a good night. Go enjoy your dinners.